Love horror movies, haunted houses, creepy cult classics? Love a good drink while you scream? Then you need to check out Spooky Sips, the podcast where three spooky-loving ladies dive into horror movies old and new, all while sipping on some delicious spirits of their own. From slashers and slow burns to final girls and found footage, they bring the laughs, the screams, and the cocktails every 2 weeks. So grab your glass, hit play, and join the watch party because horror is better with friends, and maybe a little wine. New episodes every other Thursday. Listen to Spooky Sips wherever you get your podcasts.
Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that Down the Crooked Path is researched and recorded in Niagara Falls, Ontario, on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Attawandaron, and the Mississauga of Credit First. This land has been home to Indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and we recognize their enduring connection. We are grateful to share these stories on their lands that carry their histories, and we encourage our listeners to reflect on the past, present, and future of the land they call home. Welcome, wanderers, to Journey Down the Crooked Path, a place where the stories are stranger, the shadows stretch longer, and the things that go bump in the night might just be listening. I'm Amanda Joy, your guide into the eerie, the forgotten, and the downright bizarre. Here, we step off the well-lit roads of Canadian Creepies and venture into the murky corners of history, folklore, and the unexplained, where the whispers grow louder and the truth is never quite what it seems. So let's take a deep breath, watch your step, and whatever you do, don't look back. Once you start down the crooked path, you never know what might follow. Off the cold and jagged coastlines near Newfoundland, where the Atlantic carves through the fog and stone, early explorers once whispered of a place called the Isle of Demons. Marked on maps in the 1500s, near the Strait of Belle Island, this island flickered between legend and charted reality, only to fade from navigation as knowledge of the region grew. Sailors and coastal dwellers spoke of strange voices on windless nights, lights flickering through the mist, and figures drifting just beyond sight. Phenomenon that might be traced to Arctic mirages, magnetic interference, or something less easily explained. But if it was ever real, its coordinations were lost to time. Some claim to see gleaming eyes like wet stones, or heard soft chanting rising from the waves. These accounts were never confirmed, only echoed across generations, passed from mariner to mariner, like salt-slicked warnings. The Isle of Demons became less a location and more of a haunting possibility, a reflection of superstition, fear, and the sea's ability to distort not just vision, but memory itself. It's as if this island sank without a trace, or maybe it was just never a part of our world to begin with. What makes a place vanish? Time? Tide? Or something darker? Tonight we follow the voices and dive beneath the surface and ask the questions no one wants to answer. What happened to the demon isle of Corpon and its beastly inhabitants? In 1508, a Dutch monk and choreographer named Johannes Banches etched one of the earliest known European maps to depict parts of North America. And nestled between the coastlines of Greenland and Newfoundland, he marked something far stranger than mere geography. Two small islands appeared in the Strait of Belle Isle, a narrow passage dividing Newfoundland from Labrador. Beside them, Rush inscribed a chilling note. Demons assaulted ships near these islands, which are avoided, but not without peril. These weren't just rocks in the sea. They were feared. Sailors spoke of voices in the wind, illusions in the mist, and a sense of being watched. The islands were avoided not because of storms or reef, but because of what was said to live there. Rouge may have drawn from older legends, possibly relocating the mythical island of Santaneas, a place of devils often shown in 15th century maps, to this more northerly location. His map, published in the new edition of Ptolemy's Geographia, was only the second printed map to ever include the New World, and yet, amid the excitement of discovery, he gave space to a place that explorers feared more than they understood. In 1956, Italian cartographer Giacomo Gastaldi published his map in La Nuova Francia, and with it, the Island of Demons reached its most dramatic and terrifying form. No longer a pair of small, ominous rocks in the sea, Gastaldi's version of the island sprawled across the northern reaches of Newfoundland, depicting it as far larger than the island itself. It was no longer a place to be feared, it was a realm unto itself. The map's illustrations were vivid and unsettling. Gastaldi filled the island with bat-winged demons, griffin-like birds, and monstrous creatures that seemed to defy nature. These weren't symbolic flourishes, they were warnings. The map suggested that this island was not merely haunted, but actively hostile. A place where the air itself might turn against you, and the wildlife was more nightmare than natural. This cartographic exaggeration reflected the growing mythological surroundings of the island. Tales of sailors hearing voices, of ships vanishing in calm waters, and of noble women marooned there who survived only by sheer will and divine mercy. Gastaldi's map helped cement the island of Demon in European imagination. It became a fixture for fear, a place that blurred the lines between myth and geography, and yet, within a century, it would vanish from the maps entirely, as if the demons had reclaimed their domain and pulled it back beneath the waves. By the mid-1600s, the Island of Demons quietly vanished from the maps. For over a century, it had loomed large in cartographic imagination, a place of winged demons and spectral torment. But as exploration of the North Atlantic intensified, something became clear. No one could find it. Ships passed through the Strait of Belle Island without incident. Expeditions mapped the coastlines of Newfoundland and Labrador with increasing precision, and yet, the island that had once been feared and avoided simply wasn't there. No wreckage, no landfall, no confirmation. Cartographers, faced with mounting evidence, or rather the absence of it, began to reconsider. The age of myth was giving way to the age of measurement. The Isle of Demons, once treated as real and a dangerous place, was quietly erased from the charts, not because it was disproven by a singular event, but because it had failed to be proven at all. It joined the ranks of other phantom islands, places born from fear, misinterpretation, or legend, and later undone by the steady march of reason. Some historians believe that the island may have been a distorted echo of a real landform like Quirlpin Island or Harrington's Harbor. Others suggested it was a symbolic warning, a cartographic caution against the unknown. For generations, sailors passing through the Strait of Belle Island spoke of strange happenings. The sea was considered colder, they said, and the fog thicker than anywhere else along the coast. Some claimed that their compasses spun wildly near certain stretches of water, although no land was visible. Others swore that they heard voices, not cries or shouts, but murmurs, unintelligible and constant, like a crowd whispering just beyond the reach of understanding. The Micmac people, who knew the land and sea long before European ships arrived, avoided the area. They didn't name it, didn't mark it. When asked, they spoke of spirits that twisted the senses, not benevolent in the way of devils, but ancient and restless, the kind that conjures illusions, made a man see what wasn't there or miss what was. The French explorer André Thevet recorded tales of sailors who passed through the islands and felt as though they were caught in a storm, although the skies were clear. They heard voices around the mats and felt their ships pulled by unseen currents and saw shapes moving along the shore that vanished when approached. One account described a great din in the air, as if hundreds of people were speaking all at once, although no words could be made out. Even after the island was removed from the charts in the 17th century, the stories still persisted. Fishermen avoided the area altogether. They said they could still feel it in their bones. It was a silence that was too deep and a wind that carried more than air. Some say that the island hadn't disappeared. It was rumored that it had simply slipped into a place where maps couldn't follow. And so the island of demons lingers, not in ink, but in superstition, in the way that old mariners glance over their shoulders when a fog rolls in, or stories of coastal taverns where the sea is always listening. Woe was me. The tale all too true. The dream of love was brief, the pain is long. The ship that bore us o'er the ocean blue bore also wrath and fate and bitter wrong. Robert fell, stern Robert fell, my kingsman. He who tore me from my lover's arm and flung me onto that demon-haunted isle to die. There, with my Eugene and my faithful nurse, I faced fiends that shrieked across the night. The winds were voices, and the waves a curse, and every shadow wore a shape of fright.
Once upon a time, in the land of everyday moments, there lived a sprinkle of magic called icing sugar photography. From sticky cake smash smiles to wind-swept yes moments, they capture the sugar sweet, the beautifully messy, and everything in between. Whether you're a blushing bride or a blooming family, or just want to freeze time for a second, icing sugar photography is your fairy god lens. Visit icingsugarphotography.com and follow along on Instagram at icingsugarphoto. Let your story sparkle, because life is sweet and memories should be too.
In this haunting expert from Marguerite, or The Isle of Demons by author George Martin, it plunges us into the voice of a woman who was exiled onto the island for love. Her name was Marguerite de la Roque, and they say that she is the only soul to ever truly inhabit the island. According to the story, the year was 1542. A colonizing expedition had set sail for New France, now Quebec, commanded by Jean-François de Roberval, a man of high authority. Among those aboard was Marguerite de la Roque, a noblewoman from France. Her presence on the voyage was unusual, but her station gave her a little degree of protection, though not enough to shield her from what would come. Accounts vary as to Roberval's relations to her. Some called him her uncle, others a distant cousin, but whatever the truth was, he held power over Marguerite and exercised it with unwavering control. During the voyage, she entered into a secret romance with a young man named Matthew, who had joined the expedition in disguise. He was not of noble birth. He was sharp and resourceful, and clearly devoted to her. Bastane, Marguerite's handmaid, was the only person who knew the truth of their relationship and helped them conceal it. Eventually, their secret was exposed, and Roberval's reaction was immediate and unforgiving. Whether it was religious strictness, social reputation, or family inheritance that influenced him most, he made the decision that would define Marguerite's fate. He ordered her, Matthew, and Byzantine to be left on an island off the coast of Newfoundland. The location was feared by sailors and mentioned only in hushed tones. Those who passed near it told of strange winds, illusions, and voices that carried from nowhere. Life on the island quickly turned to survival. Marguerite gave birth to a child during her exile, but the child didn't live long. Shortly afterwards, both Matthew and Byzantine also died, and she remained alone. To stay alive, Marguerite hunted animals and endured 2 harsh winters in isolation. When a group of Basque fishermen came across the island, they found her still living. Her survival was considered extraordinary, and she was brought back to France, where her story spread through the noble households and working taverns alike. Marguerite de la Roque's ordeal on a forsaken island is more than a tale of forbidden love and survival. It's a vivid example of how fear and isolation can shape human perception. Marguerite endured death, solitude, and psychological torment, haunted not just by the loss, but by eerie phenomenon that she struggled to explain. Her story transformed the island into a canvas for supernatural dread, a place where the wind becomes a whisper and shadows took on spectral form. But what was this island really? Was the Island of Demons a real landmass lost to time, or a phantom projection born from terror and myth? And why did it vanish from the maps truly? There is this theory called the Phantom Island theory, and it paints the Isle of Demons not as a physical place, but as an illusion rooted in cartographical confusion and cultural dread. During the age of exploration, maps weren't just scientific tools. They were part speculation, part storytelling. Early European explorers, driven by tales of danger and enchantment, frequently misidentified landforms or invented new ones based on rumors, fears, or fleeting encounters. Between the 1500s and the 1600s, the Isle of Demons appeared on various nautical charts, notably near Newfoundland or in the Strait of Belle Island, regions that were already prone to fog, treacherous currents, and unfamiliar coastlines. It's possible that some rugged promontory or mist-shrouded part of the island was momentarily glimpsed and then recorded as something sinister. But as exploration advanced and the supposed location failed to yield any sort of confirmation, map makers quietly removed it from their records, regaling it to legend. What's fascinating is how this cartographical ghost survived in folklore and literature long after it vanished from maps, with Marguerite's ordeal helping cement it as more than just a mistake, but as a symbol of punishment, fear, and the unknown. As the known boundaries of the Atlantic expanded, early explorers didn't just revise their maps, they were also relocating their myths. The mysterious Isle of Demons, long associated with ghostly threats and eerie encounters, may have been a reimagined version of Santianes, a legendary island from Portuguese charts. Santianes, literally Island of Devils, was thought to lurk somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, an embodiment of the unknown, sinister forces thought to roam in distant waters. But as new coastlines were charted and America came into clearer view, old tales had to find new homes. Instead of vanishing, these islands migrated. Santianes faded and the Isle of Demons appeared off the coast of Newfoundland. This shift wasn't just geographical, it was narrative. By moving the island nearer to documented territory, explorers and storytellers tethered their old fears to new lands, blending myth with colonial expansion. This theory suggests that maps weren't just about documenting reality. They were tools of myth-making, guiding not just ships, but imaginations. And in the case of Marguerite's legend, this cartographical sleight of hand transformed a real ordeal into a supernatural saga. There is also the indigenous belief theory that shifts focus from colonial myth-making to ancestral understanding of the land itself. In many First Nations traditions, places tied to death or suffering held powerful spiritual weight. These weren't evil in the European sense, but they were often seen as sacred or spiritually complex. Locations where the veil between the worlds was thin and where the living approached with reverence and caution. European explorers, unfamiliar with these traditions, may have misinterpreted the warnings and avoided the areas out of superstition, branding them with demonic labels. The name Isle of Demons likely reflects this cross-cultural clash, where spiritual depth became distorted into fear and fantasy through colonial eyes. In this lens, Marguerite's exile becomes not just a tale of survival, but an encounter with a land already imbued with a powerful, if not misunderstood, meaning. Then we have to look at historical misidentification. This suggests that the notorious Island of Demons may have had real coordinates, not just the ones infused with lore. Many researchers believed that Margaret was marooned on or near Harrington Harbor, a small island off Quebec's lower north shore. It's remote, rugged, and plausible as the site of her survival story. But over time, as chronicles embellished her tale, and poets like George Martin layered in supernatural flourishes, the location morphed into something otherworldly. The name Isle of Demons offers a kind of mythical gravity that amplifies Marguerite's suffering, turning her exile into a spiritual and psychological descent. This blending of an actual island with an imagined one is a classic example of legend making, where historical events are gradually recast with symbolic weight, and a patch of rock becomes a metaphor for isolation, punishment, and mystery. In this view, Harrington Harbor isn't just a forgotten point on a map. It's a launch pad for myth, forever entangled with a woman's harrowing fight to stay alive and the cultural need to wrap its reality into something haunted. As early explorers carved their way through fog-bound waters and unfamiliar shores, they relied on maps just as much as they relied on instinct. But in the 16th century, map-making was an imperfect art, a blend of observation, hearsay, and storytelling. The Isle of Demons sat on what was the unknown world. To those who ventured close, the landscape itself seemed alive with menace. Yet as centuries passed and expeditions failed to confirm its existence, the island slowly slipped into myth. Its presence, or lack thereof, may have been shaped as much by the forces of nature as by fear and folklore. In those remote northern seas, fog banks rolled in thick and unrelenting. The visual distortion from this fog could easily convince sailors that they'd spotted land when none existed. Combined with a mirage known as Fata Morgana, where sunlight refracts through layers of cold and warm air, makes distant objects appear to float or twist, and suddenly a fleeting cloud could become a cliff, a passing iceberg a mountain. In polar-adjacent regions like the Gulf of St. Lawrence, icebergs and ice foes could masquerade as islands. From a distance, towering ice could mimic solid rock, and when explorers later returned, only open ocean remained. It's entirely plausible that some sightings of the Isle of Demons were driven by these Arctic visitors, immense, silent, and temporary. There's also the possibility of tidal islands and sandbars, land masses visible at low tide but completely submerged hours later. To early navigators with only rudimentary tools, these illusions could easily become permanent features on a chart, especially if paired with an unsettling encounter, voices on the wind, spinning compasses, or the sudden onset of rough seas. And then there's the magnetic pull of mystery itself. This region is known to have areas of magnetic anomalies where compass readings skew and distort mariners. If one's instrument failed and strange sounds are filling the air, it's not a stretch to imagine a crew believing that they were encountering cursed territory. Natural distortions merge with emotional unease, and legends begin to take shape. All of these phenomena, light, fog, ice, tides, magnetism, converge in a region that's already steeped in tales of spirits and omens. For Marguerite de la Roque, abandoned in this shifting world, a veil between survival and myth grows thin. That she endured in such conditions is remarkable at all, but what she endured them on remains subject to debate. Maybe she was left on Harrington Harbor, a real island with rugged coastlines and long winters. Or maybe storytellers, inspired by her suffering, cast her ashore on a phantom, a place shaped not by stone and soil, but by fog, fear, and the flickering edges of human imagination. So much of the Isle of Demons story exists in the hazy crossroads of reality and myth, drawn from cartographic errors, natural illusions, and raw human fear. Whether it ever truly stood or not, the island has left its mark, not just on the physical world perhaps, but on imagination, folklore, and the fierce resistance embodied by Marguerite de la Roche. Cast away not just geographically but socially, Marguerite's survival rewrote the expectations of her time. Her tale continues to echo through history, reminding us that even the most mysterious legends are anchored in real human experience of pain, fortitude, and the endless desire to be remembered. Some stories find their endings. Others drift like fog on the tide, dissolving into something stranger and something far more permanent.
That was an eerie journey down the crooked path with Amanda. How cool was that? If you loved it, don't forget to follow Down the Crooked Path on Instagram and TikTok. Amanda shares some really fun interactive content over there. And trust me, it gets even creepier. Down the Crooked Path is our sister podcast, and you can catch new episodes every Thursday wherever you get your podcasts. So if you're into the paranormal, folklore, and strange little corners of the world, we've got you covered.